Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Between Me and Jesus. I am Azalia, and I'm here for you. Whether you're new to Christ, redeveloping your relationship with Christ, or you just want someone to read the Bible with, I am here for you. And today we are talking about Jesus being our shepherd and what it truly means to be his sheep. So let's jump right in. In John 10, Jesus says, "The one who entered by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they never follow a stranger. In fact, they run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." John 10:2-5. And then Jesus says something even deeper. He says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep." John 10:11. In Jesus' time, everyone understood sheep. Without that knowledge today, we often miss the depth of his metaphors. Modern readers have to slow down and re-see it with a new eye. And that's what I'm here today to do. Why were sheep so important to Jesus' audience? Economically, they provided wool, meat, and milk. Culturally, daily life revolved around shepherding. And spiritually, sheep were temple sacrifices. The lamb without blemish foreshadowed Christ. God's people were always called the sheep of his pasture. Sheep are highly social flock animals. They feel safest when with others. Sheep rely on a shepherd's voice to feel calm and follow. Sheep are skittish, easily frightened without a calming presence. Sheep often represent believers, being that believers should be dependent. They're vulnerable to the enemy and they're in need of guidance. Sheep are pure prey animals. They don't fight back. They flee or they freeze. Why do sheep rely on the shepherd's voice to feel calm and follow? The answer is both biological and experiential. Sheep are hardwired for safety in flock and familiarity. Sheep are prey animals, meaning their brains are constantly scanning for danger. The sound of the shepherd's voice becomes familiar and soothing. It signals safety, order, and presence. A stranger's voice causes confusion or fear, but a known voice quiets them. Sheep's vision is weak, but their hearing is strong. Sheep have poor depth perception and limited forward vision, but their hearing is excellent, so they depend more on sound than sight. This makes the shepherd's voice their guide, especially in rocky or unfamiliar terrain. Sheep bond through repetition and trust. A shepherd consistently speaks, calls, or sings while feeding, moving, or caring for the sheep. Over time, the sheep associate that voice with nourishment, protection, and peace. That's why in John 10:27, Jesus says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." So, biologically, it's about survival. Spiritually, it's about intimacy. We follow the voice that has proven itself trustworthy. Sheep actually have remarkable peripheral vision, but poor depth perception and limited clarity straight ahead. So, let's talk about the breakdown. Sheep can see up to 270 to 320 degrees without moving their heads. That's nearly panoramic, almost all the way around their bodies, because as prey animals, they need to spot predators from nearly every angle. So what are their blind spots? Their blind spot is directly behind them and a small cone right in front of their noses. So ironically, they can't see clearly what's directly ahead. They must rely on memory, hearing, and the flock. Their depth perception is poor because their eyes are on the side of their heads. They struggle with judging distances. That's why they hesitate at shadows, water, or even uneven ground. Spiritually, this hits us hard, right? Because sheep see almost everything around them, but very little ahead. They need a shepherd to guide them forward, especially when the path is rocky or unclear, just like us. So let's talk about why relying on memory for them is not as effective. Surprisingly, sheep have very effective memories, especially for faces, voices, and paths. Here's how memory works for them. Sheep can recognize up to 50 individual sheep faces and remember them for over 2 years. They can also recognize human faces and distinguish familiar people from strangers. This is important for flock bonding and for trusting their shepherd. Sheep remember safe routes to food, water, and shelter. Even if they can't see clearly ahead, they follow paths based on familiarity and repetition. That's why once a shepherd leads them somewhere once, they often remember it the next time. Sheep learn and retain the specific voice of their shepherd. This vocal recognition becomes a calming cue in unfamiliar places, so memory and trust work together to guide them. Their memory is very effective in stable, familiar environments, but under stress or if isolated from the flock, memory alone can't guide them. They panic, they freeze, or they wonder. Sheep trust what they've known, the voice, the rhythm, the path. But when they get too far from it, even memory isn't enough. They need a shepherd to help them find their way. Let's go to Jesus' own parable of the lost sheep, directly from his mouth, recorded in Luke 15, 3 through 7, and Matthew 18, 12 through 14. Here's the Luke version, 15, 4 through 6. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. So why does this matter in light of memory? The sheep couldn't find its way back, even if it had been on that path before. Its memory wasn't enough. Fear or distance had overwhelmed it, but the shepherd didn't wait for it to remember. He searched and he carried it home. Jesus tells this story to show how God pursues those who wander, even if they once walked the right path. Sheep panic when they can't hear or see the shepherd, especially if they feel isolated or sense danger. The response isn't immediate like flipping a switch, but it builds up as they lose cues of safety. What triggers panic in sheep? Separation from the flock or silence from the shepherd, unfamiliar terrain or shadows, sense or sound of a predator. There is no fixed time like 5 minutes, but it follows this pattern. There is mild alert, the sheep stop moving, they freeze, and then they scan. There's increased anxiety, head jerking, restlessness, moving in circles. And then there's full panic, scattering, running blindly, and sometimes injuring themselves or getting stuck. If a sheep can't hear the shepherd or see other sheep for more than a few moments in an unfamiliar place, stress rises fast. Without a voice to follow, they don't reason their way home. They freeze, flee, or fall. That's why Jesus says, My sheep hear my voice and they follow me in John 10:27. Not because they're smart, but because they're safe only when they're near him. When Jesus seems silent, we panic. Just like sheep do, we begin to question our direction, fear we're alone, look for anything to follow, even if it leads us off a cliff. This is all over the Bible. David in Psalms, Why, Lord, do you stand so far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? Psalm 10:1. He knew God was real, but the silence still rattled him. Elijah in the cave, I have had enough, Lord. I'm the only one left. 1 King 19. Elijah panicked after God showed up in fire before, but then went quiet. God eventually spoke in a gentle whisper, not thunder. We panic because we are, at our core, creatures who depend on a voice. We weren't made to navigate the wilderness without it, but here's the comfort. His silence is not his absence. And just like the shepherd, he's never far, even when we can't hear him. In biblical times, shepherds made frequent, gentle sounds to keep the sheep calm, oriented, and close. It wasn't random noise, it was intentional presence. So, what kind of sounds? Calling by name. Shepherds named their sheep and called them individually. Jesus refers to this directly. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. John 10:3. Singing or speaking softly to soothe the flock during movement or rest. The tone became familiar and anchoring, like a parent humming to a baby. Specific commands or whistles used to direct or warn, like trained voice cues. The sheep learned this sound means move, this one means rest, this one means danger. Stack tapping or footstep, subtle rhythmic cues, just enough to say, I'm still here. Why does constant sound matter to sheep? Sheep can't see clearly ahead, so the voice becomes their comfort. When the shepherd stops making sounds, especially in uncertain places, the sheep become anxious. The voice is safety, the silence is unknown. Spiritually, God often speaks softly but consistently, not always with fireworks, but with His word, His spiritual nudge, His peace, His timing, His people. When you stop hearing him, the sheep instinct kicks in. Where is he? Am I lost? But even in silence, he is present and often waiting for us to pause, listen, and tune in. In the context of following the shepherd, sheep need to listen more than they sound off. So let's break it down. Sheep will bleat to express hunger, separation from the flock, anxiety, calling to lamb or other sheep. Noise isn't wrong, it's a form of need, connection, or response. But when a sheep is in motion, they listen. When the flock is on the move or entering unfamiliar places, the wise sheep quiet down because they're listening for the shepherd's voice to know when to stop, turn, or to rest. Too much noise from the sheep and they can't hear the direction or they might follow the wrong voice. Spiritually, it's the same. There's a time to cry out to God, absolutely. David, Job, and Elijah cried out. But there's also a time to quiet the soul to hear. Be still and know that I'm God. Psalm 46:10. So we've done a ton of sheep facts. But what you want to know is, how does a human actually live like Jesus' sheep? We hear it all the time. I'm his sheep, he's my shepherd. But living that out in the world full of noise, pressure, and self will is another matter entirely. So here's how you actually do it. Accept that you can't see far. You don't have to know everything ahead. God doesn't give maps, He gives steps. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119:105. Not a floodlight, a lamp, one step at a time. So, what we need to do is stop needing clarity to move and start trusting. Get close enough to hear. Sheep follow the voice they recognize, but that takes time. My sheep hear my voice, John 10:27. They don't just recognize it once, they walk with it daily. So here's what you can do. You can spend time with God even when there's no crisis. An early morning prayer or reading your Bible. Stay with the flock. Sheep scatter alone, they survive together. Let us not give up meeting together. Hebrew 10:25. Walk with people who are also listening for God. It's easier to follow the shepherd when others around you are moving with him too. Bleat when you're in need. God is not annoyed by your cry. Crying is not weakness, it's a sheep instinct. The poor man cried, and the Lord heard him. Psalm 34:6. Be honest in your prayers. Say, I'm scared, I'm tired, I need you. You're not bothering Jesus, you're calling for rescue. Let Jesus' command be your calm. Commands aren't burdens, they're boundaries that create peace. He makes me lie down in green pasture. Psalm 23:2. Trust that obedience is not control, it's protection. Obey before you understand, and the rest will follow. I hope this episode was helpful in understanding the relationship between Jesus being our shepherd and us being the sheep, and what we can do to be obedient sheep, and how we can trust our shepherd to guide us to safety, to guide us home. I thank you again for being with me on another episode. I appreciate you all so very much, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.